Money buys alarms that whisper. In the luxury wing, monitors glow a sleepy amber, pumps breathe like polite lungs, and 22 of the country's finest gather in a circle, tight enough to keep out doubt. Victor Langston lies under sheets that look stolen from a five-star hotel, eyes dulled, lips cracked, the iron of his public voice reduced to numbers that keep sliding south. They tried the common. They tried the rare. They tried the brand name miracle that arrives in velvet boxes before dawn. Nothing turns the tide. At 11:58 p.m., a janitor's cart glides past the glass as if it learned to move without squeaking. Marcus Carter pushes it like a man who understands that survival is quieter than pride. Half a step behind him moves Naomi, 16, straight-backed and watchful, pretending the late shift is a favor and not the only doorway the world left ajar. No badge, no clearance. Some nights the universe forgets to lock one hinge. The air hits her first, antiseptic sharp, the faint ozone of machines working too hard, a soft citrus the rich buy to smell like cleanliness. Beneath it all, a metallic thread that doesn't belong here. Her eyes slide to Victor's hands. Not the tape, not the oxygen clip. The nails, a dull yellow pooling at the base, like a bruise that learned to hide. She shifts so lamplight brushes his hairline. The thinning there isn't random stress. It's a pattern with edges. When a resident lifts a lip with a gloved finger, the gum flashes a midnight rim that doesn't match the chart. She says nothing. In rooms like this, coats speak before people do. Marcus glances back, reading her face the way black fathers learn to read weather, fast, careful, ready to shield. Naomi counts 3 breaths and opens the file cabinet in her head, the one she built at a chipped kitchen table. Numbness that crawls, stomach pain that lies, hair that quits without a fight, nails that snitch on blood. Each line clicks into place like a key turning. Dr. Malcolm Rhodes owns the room without raising his voice. Silver hair, silk knot, cadence trimmed to reassure investors and widows. He stacks lab results into a neat story about rarity. Liver function sinking, neuropathy marching, imaging full of questions that look expensive. He recommends one more panel, a new angle, a paper from Zurich every head pretends to have read. The nods feel like signatures. Marcus rolls his cart to the wall and empties bins that would pass inspection twice. Naomi stands at the threshold like a reflection that refuses to blink. The lamp spills a warm halo over a sleek black jar on the nightstand, label turned outward like it wants to be photographed. She saw a twin of that jar earlier in the week, polished nails, careful smile, the promise that this cream was the only thing he tolerated. Now it sits like it belongs more than the tubes do. Victor's fingers tremble, then still. The monitors remain polite, but the numbers lean the wrong way like a man on a ledge. A resident asks, almost apologizing, if the environment could be a factor. Rhodes doesn't bite. He builds a paragraph about controls and filtration, says diligence 3 ways that all mean no. The question fades under soft shoes. Naomi rides the current of her thoughts. Nails, hairline, gums, the metal in the air, the black jar under a curated lamp. A precise, creeping failure that bright screens can't catch because the right question hasn't been asked. Patterns are her second language. They kept her calm through bus transfers, double shifts, and teachers who made new shapes from her name. She wants to step forward and put her finger on the sentence everyone keeps skipping. But in here, uniforms are megaphones. Marcus feels the voltage in his daughter and parks the cart like a shield. 5 minutes, he breathes, more prayer than permission. He lifts a biohazard bag, making a reason to be near the sink. Naomi slides a step toward the nightstand, without touching a thing. When the nurse massages a dab of cream across Victor's knuckles, the scent lifts, sweet, perfumed, and beneath it that whisper of pennies on a hot day. On the lid, the faintest iridescent bloom blinks under the lamp, the kind you only see if you've mixed compounds under bad lights and learned to trust what colors confess. The elevator chimes, A woman in winter white sweeps in with a warmth calibrated to lower shoulders. She touches Victor's forearm like an old friend, thanks the team for devotion, mentions a board call without moving her smile. In the same breath, she straightens the jar by half an inch without looking at it. Something inside Naomi clicks. The picture sharpens and refuses to blur. Numbers murmur from the monitor, softer now, as if the room is trying not to wake a sleeping house. The line dips a fraction. Rhodes orders an infusion with the certainty of a man guarding the story of himself. Consent forms appear. Pens begin their quiet scratching. Marcus empties another bin that doesn't need emptying. Protecting reputation means nothing beside protecting a child. He angles his body to give Naomi a clean view. She returns to the kitchen table in her head. To photocopies and highlighter scars, to a short list of substances that pretend to be other things unless you call them by their exact name. She traces an invisible timeline on her palm, visits, applications, declines, and sees a way to make the room listen. She can't command it, but she can build evidence the room can't ignore. A warm towel drapes over Victor's hands. The metallic note doesn't leave. It hangs on the air like a ghost that paid the rent. Naomi counts backward from 10, then again. No one asks for her chart or her theory. It doesn't matter. The chart is written on a man's body and a black jar under soft light. Midnight arrives like a held breath. The building hums the lullaby money buys. Outside, a city pauses for a man who used to bend it. Inside, a 16-year-old decides she won't wait for permission to save a life. She will not stand at the edge of a story about to end wrong. She steps to her father's side and nods once. Marcus reads the vow in her eyes, the one his own mother wore when bills were due and hope was late. He doesn't ask what. He only says, "Be careful." A sentence that carries centuries. If stories where truth breaks through closed doors speak to you, tap like, subscribe, and ring the bell. The next moments come fast, and you'll want to hear every heartbeat. Naomi moved deeper into the suite, the wheels of her father's cart whispering behind her. The Langston Pavilion didn't look like a hospital. It looked like a kingdom rehearsed to hide suffering. Velvet carpets drank the sound of shoes. Chandeliers drowned the antiseptic glare. Mahogany walls swallowed the smell of bleach. Nurses moved like concierges. Their voices dipped in quiet, their faces polished masks. Security stood in corners like sculptures, their posture reminding everyone which bodies belonged and which didn't. Marcus bowed into invisibility, his eyes lowered, shoulders folded. He had mastered survival in places where uniforms spoke louder than voices. But Naomi was not built to vanish. Her chin tilted, her gaze scanned everything with the hunger of someone who studied even when lights went out at home. The luxury pressed against her chest. Perfect fruit bowls on polished tables. Art that cost more than her father's salary, hanging where families prayed not to lose someone. It was a different America, and in this America, she and her father were shadows. At the foot of the bed stood Dr. Malcolm Rhodes. Silver hair, silver tie, a cadence that carried like gospel. He spoke, and the room bowed without bending. Charts lay stacked like scripture in his hands. He told them a story about mystery, liver function collapsing, neuropathy advancing, alopecia creeping, imaging that refused to explain itself. His voice wrapped uncertainty in velvet, dressed failure in authority. Every nod in the room sounded like obedience. Naomi stayed at the margin, her eyes flicking to the clipboard half hidden beneath folded sheets. One glimpse was enough. Peripheral numbness, gastrointestinal decline, hair loss marked with a question mark. Her pulse kicked hard. These were not random fragments. They were beads on the same string. She had read them before. Old books spread on the kitchen table, her mother's hand steadying the flashlight when power went out. A young doctor at the edge of the circle, Dr. Adrian Park, shifted on his feet. His voice, low but edged with curiosity, cut into the calm. Could exposure be playing a role? Something environmental? Topical agents? The pattern. He didn't finish. Rhodes's eyes slid over him like glass. His reply, soft but sharp, sliced the question away. We have controlled for all variables. Please, focus on evidence, not speculation. The dismissal cracked like a whip dressed in politeness. Park closed his mouth, his shoulders folding back into silence. Naomi's chest tightened. She wanted to shout. Exposure wasn't speculation. It was the only thing that made sense. Nails yellowed at the base, gums edged in bruise, hairline receding in a pattern too neat for stress, stomach complaints that shifted and lied. Each symptom on its own could be bent into any theory. But together, they drew a picture no one wanted to name, a picture her textbooks had whispered about in margins, poisons that disguise themselves as 10 diseases at once, unless you ask the precise question they recognize. Rhodes's voice filled the air again, smooth as marble. He spoke of novel trials, Zurich papers, conferences that cost more than rent. Heads nodded, pens scribbled, eyes pretended certainty. Naomi stood frozen, heat rising under her skin. She had seen this before, teachers mispronouncing her name, pretending not to hear her answer, deciding she was wrong before she spoke. She had learned then to stay quiet, but her silence had teeth now. Marcus moved closer, his body angled between her and the circle of coats. "Don't," he whispered, eyes begging. His tone carried the weight of generations taught to survive by bowing. Naomi clenched her jaw, fighting the urge to push past him. Her father was right. Voices like theirs didn't echo in rooms like this. They dissolved. Still, her eyes refused to close. She locked on the sleek black jar on the nightstand. The label gleamed under the lamp like it knew it was being watched. She remembered the woman who had placed it days ago. Polished nails, rehearsed warmth, insisting it was the only lotion Victor would tolerate. Naomi's mind flashed to lectures streamed on a cracked laptop, professors explaining how heavy metals shimmer when suspended in creams, how iridescence betrayed what microscopes confirmed. The jar caught the lamplight again, a faint sheen flickering across its lid. A message hidden in plain sight. She turned back to the chart in her memory, neuropathy climbing the body like a ladder, gastrointestinal distress masking itself, hair loss creeping, nails discolored. It was a list she could recite like scripture. Together, they whispered one word. She bit her tongue before it slipped out. Saying it here would be suicide. The doctors closed their discussion with solemn nods, Rhodes blessing their theories like commandments. They moved in polished choreography, adjusting lines, ordering panels, documenting decline. Naomi gripped the card's handle tighter, her nails pressing into cheap plastic. She was the only one who saw the thread tying it all together. 22 specialists circled the bed, but none of them looked where the truth burned brightest. Her father steered the cart back toward the door, his shoulders slumped with relief. Naomi's gaze lingered on the black jar, the shimmer on its lid, the chart folded under sheets, each detail locked into place inside her, like teeth on a gear. She didn't need permission to see what was already written. She just needed the courage to make the world hear it. The door whispered open, and the air shifted before anyone looked up. Elaine Burke entered like a storm disguised as silk. Her coat, winter gray cashmere, caught the lamplight as if it were stitched with silver. Perfume spread in her wake, layered and intentional, covering antiseptic and ozone with something sweet enough to choke. Every doctor in the room knew her face from magazines. Victor Langston's rival once, his devoted friend now. She didn't hurry. Her steps claimed the floor. She bent over Victor's bed, her gloved hand resting against his arm with a familiarity that no chart could justify. "Victor," she cooed, her voice dipped in honey. "I brought you something you love." From her bag she lifted it, the sleek black jar. The label shimmered under the lamp, Swiss letters carved in confidence, crest embossed like royalty. She set it on the nightstand with a precision that felt rehearsed, turning it outward, centered beneath the light. The jar didn't just sit there, it posed. Naomi froze, her breath locked in her throat. The lid caught the beam and gave back a faint ripple, metallic, oil-slicked. Wrong. She had seen cheap lotions before, borrowed drugstore brands her mother stretched across dry winters. They never shimmered like this. This was chemical theater, a glow that betrayed itself. Elaine unscrewed the lid with ceremony. The scent rushed out, floral, powdery, and underneath, a blade of metal. It sliced past Naomi's nose straight to memory, the smell of pennies clutched too long in a sweaty palm. She blinked hard, thinking she imagined it. but Marcus stiffened at her side, nostrils flaring. He smelled it too. His hand gripped the cart tighter. "Consistency is love," Elaine said sweetly, dipping 2 manicured fingers into the cream. The diamonds on her wrist glinted as she massaged it into Victor's paper-thin skin. She smiled at the doctors, letting them watch the performance. "This is the only brand he tolerates. I searched the world for it. His skin rejects everything else." Her tone was gentle, but every word landed like a staged line. Naomi's stomach twisted. She couldn't look away. Each stroke of Elaine's hand left a faint gloss on Victor's knuckles, unnatural under the lamp. She had studied slides where poisons crept invisible through dermal layers. Here it wasn't theory. It was happening in front of her eyes. Marcus leaned close, whispering through clenched teeth. "Don't stare!" His voice trembled with warning. "Eyes down! Now!" Naomi obeyed half a second too late. Rhodes's head had already turned. He greeted Elaine with his smooth authority. "Ms. Burke, your visits are consistent." The pause dripped with something colder than politeness. Elaine laughed softly, never breaking rhythm as she rubbed cream into Victor's thinning temples. "Consistency is what keeps him calm. Isn't that right, Victor?" The man on the bed gave no answer beyond shallow breaths, chest lifting like silk being tugged by invisible strings. Naomi's vision narrowed. The jar had shifted since last night. Yesterday it sat further from the lamp. Today it was angled perfectly for the shimmer to show. That wasn't chance. That was staging. Someone wanted the glow to be seen, but not recognized. Naomi swallowed hard, pulse hammering against her throat. She remembered the list scrawled across the margins of her mother's textbooks, substances that hide in plain sight, absorbed through the skin, building a slow empire of damage. Hair falling in patterns, nails discoloring, nerves dying mile by mile. Symptoms Victor carried like a checklist. Symptoms everyone else called mystery. Elaine snapped the lid closed with a crisp twist and set the jar back, half an inch closer to the lamp than before. Her smile never broke. She brushed a stray lock of Victor's hair back, her fingers leaving a sheen Naomi couldn't unsee. "He insists I apply it myself," Elaine said, her eyes catching Rhodes's for half a beat too long. "It comforts him." The exchange passed without question. No one spoke. No one challenged. The authority in the room bent itself to her poise. Naomi's throat burned. She wanted to scream. She wanted to slap the jar off the nightstand, to shout the word that echoed in her skull. Poison. Instead, she held still, her nails digging crescents into her palms. Marcus tugged the cart toward the wall, his jaw locked. "Don't look. Don't even breathe too loud." He knew too well what happened when people like them looked too long in places like this. Naomi dropped her gaze, but the picture had already carved itself into her mind. The shimmer, the smell, the pattern of symptoms. The jar moved like a chess piece. It wasn't just cream. It was the vector. It was the knife hidden in lotion. And she was the only one in the room who saw it. The alarms didn't whisper this time. They screamed. A jagged siren tore through the Langston Pavilion at 2:17 a.m., sharp enough to rattle glass and bones. Red strobes pulsed against the mahogany, painting the luxury suite like a crime scene. Nurses sprinted from side corridors, doctors slammed through double doors, and the polished calm of money collapsed into chaos. Naomi froze mid-step, the mop handle clutched in her hands. Through the half-open door, she saw Victor Langston's body convulse under silk sheets, his chest jerking against the straps of machines meant to soothe, not save. Monitors bled crimson, numbers plunging in cruel rhythm. The man whose name once moved markets was reduced to raw flesh in revolt. Marcus's instinct was faster than thought. His arm swept Naomi back, shielding her against the wall. "Stay here!" he barked, voice steady but edged with panic. His broad frame became a barrier, his janitor's cart angled like a shield. Naomi pressed into him, heart hammering, but her eyes locked on the suite. Dr. Rhodes stormed in with the grace of a man who believed storms answered to him. His voice cut through panic like steel. IV push. Stabilize cardiac rhythm. Get respiratory support, now. The team moved in sync, syringes flashing, tubing snapping into place, hands darting over machines. But the billionaire's body refused obedience, his vitals tumbling lower. Naomi's throat burned. She whispered the word that had been stalking her mind since the shimmer on the jar. Thallium. The syllables slipped out like a secret. Marcus stiffened. His hand clamped her arm so hard it hurt. "Not here," he hissed. His eyes blazed with terror. "You want us both gone? You want us fired before dawn? Not here." "But Dad, enough!" he snapped, louder than he meant, fear making the word sharp. "You don't speak that name in this room. Ever." Inside, a younger voice cut through. Dr. Park, his face pale, his tone urgent. "These symptoms, they don't align with autoimmune collapse, the neuropathy, the hair loss, the GI distress. It looks patterned. Could this be exposure? Something topical? Food? Lotion?" Every head turned toward Rhodes. His eyes sliced into Park like a blade. "We've tested everything in this suite twice. Do not waste critical seconds on amateur theories." His voice was silk wrapped around iron. Park faltered, lips pressing into silence, retreating back into the obedient circle. Naomi's blood boiled. She wanted to shout, to tell them she smelled the metal, saw the gloss on Victor's nails, watched Elaine smear poison into his skin with a smile. She wanted to rip the jar from the nightstand and hold it under Rhodes's nose. Instead, she bit her tongue until she tasted blood. Her father's grip anchored her, heavy with centuries of warnings. Don't speak where you're not invited. Don't fight battles you can't survive. The doctors poured treatment into Victor's veins, chasing shadows, while the real enemy clung to his skin in plain sight. Nurses called out numbers, liver enzymes collapsing, kidneys shutting down. The room spun tighter, faster. Marcus whispered into Naomi's ear, his voice breaking. "They don't hear us. They never will." But Naomi couldn't unsee it. Every symptom aligned too perfectly. The shimmer on the jar, the smell of pennies, the hair thinning in a neat line. It wasn't disease. It was design. Her mother's textbooks came roaring back, margins scrawled with notes about invisible toxins. Thallium, odorless, tasteless, absorbed through skin, masquerading as everything else until it was too late. Victor's monitor shrieked again. His pulse staggered, then spiked erratically. Rhodes barked new orders, piling intervention on intervention. Consent forms appeared, nurses scribbling, but none of it slowed the collapse. Naomi's nails bit into her palms. They were throwing fire at smoke while the flames ate the house. She leaned closer to Marcus, desperate. "It's the cream. It's on his skin right now." Her voice barely moved the air. Marcus shook his head, jaw tight. "Don't. For God's sake, don't." His voice cracked with fear. "They'll erase us." Inside the suite, Park tried again, weaker this time. "If it is exposure, keratin samples could show—" Rhodes's glare cut him off. "Focus on medicine. Leave detective work to novels." His words slammed like a gavel, final and merciless. Park lowered his gaze, his silence sealing the verdict. Naomi's rage boiled over. How many times would truth be silenced because it came in the wrong uniform, the wrong voice, the wrong skin? She clenched her fists, chest heaving, as the doctors swarmed around Victor's dying body. Then suddenly the monitor steadied, barely. A fragile plateau, numbers hovering just above collapse. Nurses exhaled relief, their faces ghost white. Rhodes delivered clipped orders, wrapping the crisis in the illusion of control. The room exhaled, but the tension lingered like a ghost. Marcus tugged the cart down the hall, pulling Naomi with him. "Keep your head down," he growled, voice breaking under the weight of dread. "We cannot fight them. Not here. Not this way." Naomi stumbled beside him, her chest blazing. His words weren't surrender. They were chains. But chains could be broken. As the suite doors closed behind them, Naomi's eyes burned with a vow. If no one would listen, she would bring proof so undeniable even Rhodes couldn't bury it. She whispered under her breath, the promise stitching itself into her bones. If they won't listen, I'll make them see. The kitchen smelled faintly of detergent and fried oil from the neighbors downstairs. Naomi sat at the chipped table, spreading a stack of old textbooks across its scarred surface. Their spines were cracked, their margins littered with her mother's handwriting. The dim bulb overhead flickered, but she didn't care. Her hands trembled as she flipped pages, her eyes burning across highlighted lines she had memorized years ago. Peripheral neuropathy, alopecia, gastrointestinal distress. Each word felt like it had been waiting for her to come back. She grabbed a pen and scrawled them onto a scrap of paper torn from a grocery bag. Beneath them she wrote a single word, her hand shaking. Thallium. She whispered it aloud, the sound fragile, but electric. Her chest tightened with memory. Nights when her mother would slide a glass of sweet tea beside her and say, "Show me what you learned today." Her mother's voice was firm but kind, insisting that brilliance could survive chipped furniture and overdue rent. Naomi could almost see her mother leaning over, tapping the page, reminding her to connect the dots. Back then, it felt like preparation. Now it felt like prophecy. The apartment door clicked open. Marcus stepped in, shoulders heavy from the night shift, his work shirt stained with bleach and sweat. He paused when he saw the table covered in books, his daughter hunched over like she was taking an exam no one had assigned. His jaw tightened. "Naomi," he said, his voice rough. "Drop it. We don't belong in their business." She didn't look up. "Dad, I saw the signs. I smelled it. The cream, the shimmer, the nails. Shimmer, it all fits. They don't see it because they're not looking." She tapped the word she had written, pressing the ink deeper into the paper. "But I am." Marcus walked closer, his shadow stretching over the table. "You're 16. You're not a doctor. You're the daughter of a janitor who could be fired before sunrise if you cause trouble." His voice cracked with exhaustion and fear. "We need this job. You think Langston's life pays our rent? No, my paycheck does. You push too far, we lose it." Naomi lifted her head, eyes blazing. "I'm not just your daughter. I'm the only one who saw what 22 doctors missed." The words shot out sharper than she intended, but she didn't take them back. Marcus flinched, as if the sentence had struck him. He rubbed his temples, pacing. "You don't understand. These people don't just ignore voices like ours. They erase them. You speak up and they'll laugh. Or worse, they'll make sure we disappear." Naomi stood, her chair scraping the floor. "And what about Victor Langston? What if he dies because nobody listened? You always told me doing the right thing matters, even if no one notices. You said that." Her voice cracked, but the fire in her chest roared louder. Marcus spun on her, his eyes wet but fierce. "The right thing and the safe thing aren't the same." Her throat tightened. "Then I'll choose the right thing." The silence that followed was brutal. Marcus dropped into a chair, his body folding under years of weight. "You don't know what you're risking. They don't see brilliance in you. They see trouble. They see a girl out of place." Naomi clenched her fists. "Then I'll give them proof they can't erase. Evidence. Something so clear even roads can't bury it." She pointed at the textbooks, the scrawled notes, the word thallium underlined twice. "This isn't a guess. It's science. And it's killing him." Marcus shook his head, torn between pride and dread. "How do you think you'll find that proof? With a mop? With scraps from a janitor's cart?" Naomi's eyes dropped to the books, her mother's handwriting glowing like a lantern. "With what Mom taught me. With what you taught me. Pay attention. See what others miss. I don't need their lab. I just need to think." He stared at her, his chest rising and falling. She looked so much like her mother when she was defiant, her chin tilted high even when the world pressed down. He wanted to protect her, but how do you cage fire without killing it? Naomi gathered her notes closer, scribbling furiously on the back of an old envelope. "Tomorrow I'll find a way," she murmured, half to herself, half to the ghost of her mother at her shoulder. Marcus buried his face in his hands, his voice breaking. "Your mother would be proud and terrified." The apartment went still except for the scratch of Naomi's pen and the low hum of the refrigerator. Marcus stared at his daughter, her face lit by a bulb that buzzed like it might die any second. She was already planning, already stepping into danger, and he knew, with a weight that crushed his chest, there was no stopping her. The corridor of the Langston Pavilion was silent, too silent for a place carrying so much fear. Naomi crouched low behind her father's cart, heart rattling against her ribs. She had been watching the schedules for days, memorizing the cracks in the armor of luxury. Nurses swapped shifts every few hours, and between one leaving and another arriving, the suite stood vulnerable for 60 seconds. That was her window. Tonight, she was going to take it. Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his glove, eyes darting toward the glowing clock at the end of the hall. "Naomi, don't," he whispered, his voice sharp with dread. "If someone catches us, we're finished. They'll fire me on the spot." Naomi's eyes never left the suite door. "Then keep watch." Her voice was low, but her jaw was steel. "Just give me 60 seconds. The soft chime of the departing nurse echoed like fate. The suite door hissed open as she exited, balancing a clipboard under her arm. She passed them without a glance. Naomi felt her pulse spike. This was it. Before Marcus could grab her arm, she slipped inside. The suite glowed with a false calm. Victor Langston lay half-conscious under layers of silk, his chest rising weakly, machines humming their artificial lullabies. The nightstand gleamed in the lamplight, and there it was, the black jar. Perfectly centered, label turned forward like it belonged in a magazine spread. Naomi's hands trembled as she pulled a small, sterile vial from her pocket, stolen from a supply cart 2 nights earlier. She snapped a quick photo of the jar with her cracked phone, proof that she had touched nothing. Then slowly, she twisted the lid. The sound was soft, but to her, it roared like thunder. The scent rushed up immediately, floral sweetness laced with metallic bite. She nearly gagged. Her fingers moved with the precision of someone who had rehearsed in her head 100 times. She dipped the edge of a swab into the cream, just enough to leave a trace, and sealed it inside the vial. She labeled it with the corner of a bandage strip, Sample A, then shoved it into her pocket. Another snap of her phone captured the jar's position before she carefully replaced it, aligning the label and angling the lid exactly as she'd found it. The door outside hissed. Voices floated down the hall. Naomi's blood turned to ice. She hurried to the far side of the suite, crouching behind the cart while Marcus appeared in the doorway. He was shaking, his voice trembling as he called out, "Just finishing up bins, ma'am. Won't be a second." A nurse stepped back in, her shoes tapping soft against the floor. Naomi held her breath. The nurse crossed to the monitors, scribbling numbers, her focus glued to Victor's vitals. Naomi slipped along the edge of the wall, every step measured. Praying the wheels of the cart masked her movement. She eased past Marcus, his wide frame angled to block the nurse's view. "Go," he muttered, without moving his lips. His voice was more plea than order. Naomi slid out, her hand clutching the pocket where the vial sat. The hallway outside felt like oxygen after drowning. She nearly collapsed against the wall, chest heaving. Marcus followed seconds later, his face pale, his shirt damp with fear. He didn't yell. He didn't have to. His silence was enough to carry centuries of warning. They pushed the cart down the service corridor, moving faster than they ever had without running. Naomi's hand kept brushing the pocket, reassuring herself the vial was real. It wasn't just an idea anymore. It wasn't just suspicion or memory. It was matter. It was evidence. When they reached the supply closet, Marcus slammed the door shut behind them. His chest rose and fell like a drum. "Girl, you're going to get us both killed," he rasped. "You know what happens if they find out we touched that jar?" Naomi pulled the vial out, holding it up under the buzzing bulb. The faint smear of lotion glistened inside. Her eyes burned with certainty. Or save him. Which matters more? Marcus shook his head, running both hands over his face. You don't understand the power of people like Rhodes, like Burke. They don't lose. They bury people like us. Naomi slipped the vial back into her pocket, her grip firm. Then we'll give them something they can't bury. The words hung heavy between them. Marcus wanted to argue, to shout, to make her see the danger. But when he looked at her, he saw the fire her mother carried, the same fire that refused to bow even when the world demanded it. His jaw clenched. He said nothing. Naomi leaned against the door, her heart still pounding. For the first time, she felt a weapon in her hand, not just an idea. She had stolen proof from the center of power and walked out unseen. It was reckless. It was impossible. But it was hers. The supply closet was barely big enough for 2 people, the air thick with bleach and rubber gloves. Naomi shoved rags and bottles aside, clearing a shelf with frantic hands. The vial burned hot in her pocket like it was alive. She pulled it out, set it down gently, and reached for the scavenged tools she had hidden. 2 old beakers Marcus had saved, a scrap of foil twisted into wire, a baggie of baking soda stolen from the cafeteria kitchen. Crude, but it would have to do. Marcus stood with his back against the door, his huge frame blocking out the world. His chest rose and fell like a bellows. Naomi, this is madness. You think you're going to solve what 22 doctors couldn't with a rag and some foil? She didn't look up. Her hands moved too fast to stop. She poured water into 1 beaker, sprinkled baking soda, then scraped the tiniest smear of lotion from the vial into the liquid. It floated at first, pearly and smug, refusing to mix. Her heart pounded. She dipped the foil stirrer, twisted tight around a bent wire, and swirled. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. The air buzzed with the closet's old bulb, Marcus's breath loud, the smell of detergent choking them both. Naomi's eyes burned. Please, she prayed, though she didn't know if she was praying to God, her mother, or science itself. Then it began. The clear liquid clouded, faint at first, then blooming darker, a milky precipitate curling like smoke underwater. Her breath caught. She lifted the beaker closer to the light. The cloudy reaction clung to the glass exactly the way her textbook diagrams had promised. Her pulse thundered. It's real, she whispered. Thallium. Marcus pushed off the door, his face twisting between awe and dread. No, you don't know that. That's junk chemistry, baby girl. They'll laugh you out of the building if you show them that. Naomi's hands shook as she scribbled notes onto a scrap of cardboard ripped from a supply box. Mixture, reaction time, result. She spoke each word as she wrote, forcing herself steady. Details mean evidence, and evidence means they can't ignore me. Marcus grabbed her wrist, desperate. They can. They will. They'll say you contaminated it. They'll say you don't know what you're doing. They'll erase this and you, before you can take another breath. Naomi yanked free, eyes blazing. Then I'll make them choke on their laughter. The words hung in the closet, sharper than glass. Marcus flinched, but pride flickered in his eyes even as fear drowned it. You're 16, he said, softer now. You're still just a kid. She held the beaker up again, the cloudy water trembling in her hands. I'm the kid who saw what 22 doctors missed. Marcus pressed his palms to his face, groaning. He wanted to scream at her, to drag her out, to smash the beaker so the problem vanished. But the precipitate swirled undeniable, mocking his doubts. He dropped his hands and stared. Your mother would be proud and terrified. Naomi pulled out her cracked phone, snapped a photo of the beaker, the foil stirrer, the labeled vial beside it. Proof. Proof for herself, if no one else. She sealed the vial again, slid it back into her pocket, then placed the beaker gently on the rag-draped shelf. The cloudy liquid looked harmless in the dim light, but they both knew it was a scream in glass. She sat, breathing hard, scribbling more notes, Marcus leaned against the door again, his body sagging like the weight of years had doubled. "You don't know what you've started," he said. Naomi didn't look up. "I know exactly what I've started." The closet buzzed with silence, broken only by the drip of the faucet and the scratching of her pen. Outside, the hospital hummed with indifference, nurses sweeping polished halls, doctors arguing theories, guards patrolling like statues. Inside, a janitor's daughter had just confirmed the poison killing a billionaire. Marcus whispered it like a confession. "If somebody sees this, we're finished." Naomi lifted her head, her eyes burning with defiance. "If nobody sees this, he's finished." For the first time since the alarm screamed, Marcus had no answer. Naomi's hands shook as she folded the hospital stationery into a square small enough to slip unnoticed. She had written the words in block letters, sharp and heavy, so no one could pretend not to understand. "Check for thallium poisoning. Classic presentation." Her pen had nearly torn through the page from pressing too hard. She stared at it once more, heart hammering, then tucked it under her sleeve. Marcus pushed the cart slowly down the corridor, his face tight, every step measured. They moved past Rhodes's office, where charts and clipboards lay stacked high on a side table. Naomi's breath locked in her chest. This was her chance. She leaned over the cart, slid her hand out, and slipped the folded paper onto the top clipboard. It landed silently, blending with the rest of the notes. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. His silence was a warning and a shield. Hours later, Naomi found herself near the conference room, the door cracked just enough for sound to escape. She pushed the mop slowly across the polished floor, pretending to polish what already gleamed. Inside, voices of authority rumbled like a choir. Rhodes's tone rose above them, smooth and amused. "And apparently," he said, drawing out the words, "our cleaning staff has developed diagnostic opinions." Laughter rippled across the table. Naomi froze, the mop handle slick in her grip. Another doctor chuckled. "What's the diagnosis this time?" Rhodes unfolded the note with exaggerated care, his silver hair gleaming under the recessed lights. He read it aloud as if reciting a joke. "Thallium poisoning. Can you imagine?" The room erupted again, polite but cruel laughter echoing like glass shattering. Naomi's throat burned. She pressed her back against the wall, eyes stinging. She bit her lip hard enough to taste blood, forcing herself not to cry where anyone could see. She wanted to storm in, to throw her photos and notes on the table, to make them choke on the proof she had scraped together in a closet. But Marcus's warning echoed in her skull. "They don't hear us. They erase us." The laughter ebbed, leaving the air sharp. Then Dr. Park's voice broke through, tentative but steady. "To be fair," he said, "the symptoms do align. Peripheral neuropathy, alopecia, GI decline. It's unusual." For a breath, Naomi's heart leapt. Someone else saw it. But the hope snapped as Rhodes cut him down. "We tested for heavy metals in the initial workup," he said, his voice calm but final. "Standard procedure. Nothing. End of discussion." His words slammed down like a gavel, silencing any flicker of dissent. Naomi's knuckles whitened on the mop. She felt her body tremble with rage. Her note wasn't just dismissed. It had been turned into entertainment. Her science, her courage, reduced to a punchline. Through the crack in the door, she heard chairs scrape, papers shuffle, and the low hum of conversation moving on as if she had never existed. Marcus appeared at her side, his face drawn. "Keep moving," he muttered, nudging the cart. She obeyed, her steps wooden, her chest burning with humiliation. But under the fire was steel. Each laugh she heard welded her resolve tighter. If a note couldn't make them listen, she would bring evidence they couldn't laugh away. She whispered to herself, a vow carved into her bones. "Next time, they won't be able to erase me." The meeting ended with polished shoes and quiet chatter spilling into the hallway. Naomi pushed the cart beside her father, her chest still raw from the sound of their laughter. She kept her eyes on the floor, but every nerve in her body screamed with humiliation. They hadn't just dismissed her. They had turned her warning into a joke. Before she could catch her breath, a man in a security uniform stepped into their path. His face was expressionless, but his voice carried weight. "Mr. Carter," he said evenly, "we've had reports of interference. Your daughter needs to stay away from patient rooms. This is a hospital, not a classroom." Marcus froze. His jaw tightened, lips pressed into a line. "Understood," he said, the words respectful but heavy with shame. Naomi's throat burned. She stepped forward before she could stop herself. "But Marcus's hand clamped on her arm, hard enough to silence her. He forced a smile at the guard. "It won't happen again." The guard's eyes flicked to Naomi, cold and flat. "See that it doesn't. Boundaries exist for a reason." Then he turned and walked away, his boots striking the polished floor like punctuation. Naomi's face flushed hot. She wanted to scream that boundaries weren't supposed to protect poisoners, that the real trespass was happening on the nightstand under a soft lamp. Instead, she swallowed the fire, her eyes stinging. Marcus didn't let go of her arm until they turned the corner. His voice was low, almost a growl. "Do you see now? Do you see what happens when you speak out of turn? They laugh at you, they shame me, and they send security to warn us. That's the world. You can't change it." Naomi yanked her arm free, her voice sharp. "And if I stay quiet, Victor Langston dies. Is that the world you want me to accept?" Marcus's face hardened, but his eyes betrayed fear. "I want you alive. That's what I want." They moved in silence, pushing the cart through the maze of corridors. Every nurse who passed gave them polite nods that felt like veiled reminders. You belong only on the periphery. Naomi clenched her fists, nails biting into her palms. Later, she spotted Dr. Park standing alone near a nurse's station, flipping through charts, his brow furrowed, his lips tight with thought. Naomi's pulse quickened. She slowed the cart, daring to step close. "It's thallium," she whispered, her words a blade slipping between breaths. "Standard tests miss it if exposure is slow. The lotion. Check the lotion." Park's head jerked up. His eyes widened, the spark of recognition flickering. For a second, Naomi felt hope crack through the darkness, but then footsteps echoed down the hall. Another physician approached, calling Park's name. His face shuttered instantly, the flicker gone. He snapped the chart closed, his tone cool and dismissive. "You should focus on your work." Naomi's chest collapsed. She watched him walk away, his shoulders stiff, his silence louder than his words. Marcus steered the cart forward quickly, his face carved with worry. "That's it. Enough. No more whispers, no more notes. They don't want you. They don't want this." Naomi's jaw locked. Her heart screamed against the walls closing in on her, but the lesson was brutal and clear. No one would stand beside her, not Rhodes, not the Council of White Coats, not even Park, who almost believed. She was on her own. The hallway swallowed her silence, but inside of it the vow hardened again. If they refused to listen, she would find a way to force them, even if it meant standing alone. The mahogany doors to the conference room stood half open, a golden glow spilling into the corridor. Inside, 22 of the country's finest doctors sat around a gleaming table, their tablets glowing with data, their voices low and confident. At the head, Dr. Rhodes spoke with the cadence of a judge pronouncing a verdict. "Mr. Langston's decline continues. Autoimmune cascade remains our leading theory. We'll consider atypical viral syndromes if this round of interventions fails. Suggestions?" The hum of conversation rose, whispers about trials in Zurich, infusions from Johns Hopkins, consultations abroad. Naomi stood in the hall, Marcus's hand gripping her shoulder like a clamp. "Don't," he warned, his voice cracking. "You walk in there, they'll crush you." Her chest heaved. She could still smell the lotion's metallic tang, still see the shimmer on the jar's lid. Every nerve screamed that staying silent meant letting Victor die. "If I stay out here," she whispered, "he's already dead." She pulled away from her father's grip and pushed the door open. The room froze. 22 heads turned. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the hum of the air vents. Naomi stood in the doorway, small against the flood of authority, clutching a folder cobbled together, photos of the cloudy beaker, handwritten notes, the timeline she had pieced together like a crime map. Rhodes's silver brow furrowed, irritation flashing in his eyes. "This is a closed medical conference. Remove yourself immediately." Naomi stepped forward, her voice sharper than she expected. "Victor Langston isn't dying of a mystery illness. He's being poisoned with thallium." The word detonated. Some doctors scoffed, others blinked in surprise. The room rippled with disbelief. Rhodes's face hardened. "Security," he said coldly, not even looking at her. Marcus appeared behind her, cart angled like a barricade. His massive frame filled the doorway, unmoving. His silence spoke louder than a shout. No one was dragging his daughter out. Naomi pressed forward, her words tumbling in a rush. "Look at the data you've collected. Progressive neuropathy climbing from the feet upward. Alopecia in a distinct pattern. Gastrointestinal distress that shifts, but never vanishes. Cognitive decline following the same timeline. Every symptom fits. You're staring at the pattern and refusing to see it." A murmur ran down the table. Dr. Park leaned forward, his brow furrowed, eyes flicking between Naomi and the charts. Rhodes slammed a palm on the table. "Enough. This is absurd. You are not qualified to speak here." Naomi's chin lifted. "Standard heavy metal panels miss slow exposure. Sublethal doses build in tissues, not serum. That's why your tests read clean. But hair and nails keep the record. 3 months of poisoning written in keratin. Test them and you'll see." The room stilled. Several doctors exchanged uncertain glances. Park spoke quietly, almost to himself. "That's true. We rarely run keratin analysis in acute cases." Rhodes's glare cut across the table, freezing him. "We do not waste precious time on speculation fed by cleaning staff." Naomi didn't flinch. She snapped open her folder, slapped down a photo of the cloudy beaker lit under a bulb. "This was a crude test, but the reaction is unmistakable. Thallium ions precipitate under these conditions. I took the sample straight from his lotion." The air shifted. One doctor whispered, "The lotion?" Another leaned closer, unease creeping across his face. "Yes," Naomi said, seizing the crack in their armor. "The black jar his visitor brings every day. He absorbs it through his skin, dose by dose, each application timed with his decline. Look at your logs. Look at the chart. The timeline is perfect." A ripple of whispers grew louder, some skeptical, some shaken. Park's eyes sharpened with conviction. Rhodes slammed his hand again, his voice like ice. "You are fabricating nonsense to insert yourself where you don't belong. Security!" Naomi's voice sliced through his order. "Every minute you waste, he dies a little more. Run the test. If I'm wrong, throw me out. If I'm right, you save him before he crashes again." The silence that followed was suffocating. Rhodes's authority trembled, cracks running through the fortress of his control. Park stood abruptly. "She's right about the pattern, and if the lotion is the vector, we've overlooked the obvious." Half the room stirred, half recoiled. Pride and fear battled in their faces. For the first time, Naomi wasn't invisible. She had forced the circle of power to hear her. Marcus's hand tightened on the cart, his eyes burning with pride and terror. Naomi stood in the center of the storm, her body trembling, but her voice unshaken. She had broken in, and the walls were starting to tilt. The conference room was silent except for the hiss of machines and the brittle rasp of Victor Langston's breathing. Naomi stood against the wall, her folder clutched to her chest, Marcus planted firmly at the door. 22 physicians who moments ago laughed at her now shifted uneasily in their seats. Dr. Park was the first to break the silence. "If what she says is true, we can confirm it. Hair and nails retain evidence of long-term exposure. It's quick, it's conclusive." Rhodes's jaw tightened, the veins in his temple pulsing. "This is a waste of time. We do not gamble with unverified, But his words were cut short as the toxicologist on call entered, a small black case in his hands. His expression was clinical, detached, the kind of man who measured truth in numbers, not pride. Without waiting for permission, he set the kit on the table and snapped it open. Inside gleamed scissors, sterile clippers, sealed vials, and a portable analyzer the size of a typewriter. The room leaned forward. Rhodes said nothing, but his silence was brittle. The toxicologist approached Victor's bed. His hands moved with quiet precision. A nurse clipped a strand of thinning hair, laying it gently into a vial. Another clipped a sliver from the pale crescent of his nail. Each action felt louder than words. Naomi's breath caught as she watched. Every nerve wound tight. The samples slid into the analyzer. The machine hummed to life, its green light blinking in slow rhythm. The toxicologist's face revealed nothing. He keyed in commands, the device clicking and whirring as it processed. No one spoke. The silence pressed heavy, so absolute it felt sacrilegious to break it. Even Rhodes's eyes stayed fixed on the machine, though his hands twitched against the table. Marcus stood like a statue by the door, his breath shallow, his body braced for whatever storm was about to break. The screen flickered. Numbers appeared, climbing with each line of data. The toxicologist leaned closer, his brow furrowing. The hum of the machine seemed to grow louder, filling the space with dread. Naomi's hands tightened around her folder until the edges cut her palms. Then the man straightened. His voice was calm, but it detonated in the silence. Positive. Elevated thallium levels. Gasps erupted around the table. A few doctors froze, their eyes wide. Others slumped back in their chairs, faces pale. Park exhaled sharply, vindicated. Naomi's chest seized as tears pricked her eyes. Relief, triumph, rage all colliding at once. Rhodes's face drained of color. "Run it again," he barked. The toxicologist didn't flinch. "Hair and nails both confirm prolonged exposure. This is deliberate poisoning." The words struck like a gavel. Naomi's throat tightened. She had been right from the beginning, and the machine had given her truth a voice no one could laugh away. Marcus looked at her, his eyes burning with pride and fear. For a moment, Naomi thought he might weep. She had forced the world to listen. She had dragged the truth into the light. And in that stillness, in that fragile pause before the chaos resumed, Naomi Carter knew. She had won the first battle. The toxicologist's words still hung in the air, deliberate poisoning, when the suite doors slid open. Elaine Burke swept in as if she owned the place, her winter white coat trailing elegance, diamonds flashing like weaponry. In her manicured hand was another sleek black jar, pristine and waiting. She didn't notice the silence at first. Her voice rang light, practiced. "Victor, darling," she cooed, though his eyes were closed. "I brought you something you love." She lifted the jar slightly, as if unveiling treasure. "This brand has soothed him for years. No one else knows how to apply it right." Naomi's pulse surged. She stepped forward without hesitation, her finger stabbing the air. "It's her. She always brings the lotion. That's the poison." Every head turned. The room erupted in gasps, chairs scraping. Elaine froze mid-step, her perfect smile cracking. "Excuse me?" Her laugh was brittle, sharp. "You're seriously taking medical advice from a janitor's child?" She tilted her chin, trying to regain her poise. "She's desperate for attention. She planted this story." The toxicologist raised the earlier vials, his voice clipped and cold. "The lotion residue matches the sample. Thallium confirmed as the delivery vector." Elaine's face drained, then hardened. "That's absurd. This is a luxury brand from Switzerland. Do you think I'd smear poison on him with my own hands?" Naomi's voice sliced through her denial. "You made sure the jar sat in the lamplight every day so the shimmer would look like a feature, not a warning. You insisted on applying it yourself, right in front of them. You staged the murder in plain sight. Elaine's composure shattered for a flash, jaw tight, eyes darting. But she snapped back into performance. Or maybe she staged it. Who else has been sneaking around patient rooms? Who else admits to stealing supplies, pretending she's a scientist? She turned to the physicians, her tone honey over venom. "You'll believe her? Over me?" Rhodes seized on her words like a drowning man. His voice rose, desperate. She did interfere. She admitted as much. Contaminated evidence is not evidence at all. Are we going to destroy reputations based on the fantasies of a teenager? His eyes cut toward Naomi with venom, but his fear was naked. Before Naomi could answer, Dr. Park stood abruptly. His chair screeched back, his voice firm and unshakable. "Enough." She was right. I thought the same pattern myself, but didn't have the courage to say it. She's not fabricating. She's forcing us to see what pride made us ignore. The room turned. Authority shifted. Whispers hissed through the air. Doubt, outrage, dawning recognition. Elaine's hands tightened around the jar until her knuckles whitened. Then the doors burst open again. 2 FBI agents stormed in, badges flashing, their presence cutting through the chaos like thunder. "Step away from the patient," one barked, his voice commanding. His partner's eyes locked on Elaine. "Ma'am, put the jar down." Elaine's mask cracked entirely. "This is insane!" she shrieked, clutching the jar tighter. "I've cared for him every day. That girl, she's the liar." The toxicologist spoke calmly but with finality. "The lab confirms. The lotion is poisoned. Prolonged thallium exposure, absorbed through dermal application. Every symptom aligns. There is no other explanation." Gasps spread again, sharper this time. Nurses recoiled, some whispering prayers. Marcus's chest swelled with rage and pride as he stood behind his daughter, immovable. Naomi didn't waver. Her eyes locked on Elaine like a blade. "You thought no one would question a gift," Naomi said, her voice low but steady. "But you were wrong." Elaine's eyes flashed with fury, her facade gone. She lunged as if to bolt, but the agents were faster. They grabbed her wrists, wrenching the jar free. It clattered to the floor, the lid rolling in mocking circles before stopping under the bed. "Elaine Burke," the lead agent said, his tone cold as stone, "you're under arrest for attempted murder." Her protests dissolved into a shriek as they snapped cuffs around her wrists. "He was supposed to weaken, not die. I was protecting my shares." The words tumbled out like poison, sealing her guilt. The room erupted, doctors shouting, nurses recoiling, the very walls seeming to shake with outrage. Rhodes stood pale and broken, his reputation crumbling as surely as Elaine's lies. Naomi's fists unclenched, her body trembling. She had been dismissed, mocked, threatened, but now the truth was undeniable. The poisoner had been caught, and the janitor's daughter had pulled the curtain back. For the first time, every eye in the room turned toward her. Not with scorn, not with laughter, but with stunned recognition. The jar hit the tile and rolled until it tapped the baseboard, the lid spinning in a tight silver circle before settling with a cruel little click. The sound hadn't finished echoing when the monitors went wild. Red flooded the screens. A sharp alarm carved through the suite, higher than the last, meaner, as if the machines themselves were panicking. Nurses lunged for lines and tubing. Someone shouted for a crash cart. The FBI agents tightened their grip on Elaine as she jerked toward the bed, claws out, screaming that everyone was making a mistake. "Back her out," the lead agent snapped, hauling her toward the hall. "Do not obstruct care." Victor's chest seized under the sheets. His oxygen trace fell in a jagged slide. A nurse already had a bag valve mask in hand, rubber balloon flexing under frantic squeezes. Rhodes barked orders that overlapped with the alarms. Push this, hang that, check rhythm, stabilize. And for the first time, the certainty in his voice frayed at the edges. The toxicologist didn't shout. He cut through the storm with 4 words that snapped heads up. "Prussian blue. Right now." The room stuttered, then exploded into motion. A pharmacist appeared at the doorway like an answer to a prayer, a plastic bin of vials clenched to his chest. "We've got it," he said, breathless. "Limited supply, but enough to start." "Prepare oral suspension," the toxicologist said, already assembling the kit. "Get the tube in if he can't swallow. Move." A resident slid a nasogastric tube with hands that were steady, because they had to be. Another nurse drew the antidote into a syringe, mixing it into a thick blue solution that looked too simple to save a life. Elaine's last protest cracked into a sob as the agent's frog marched her past the threshold. "He needed to slow down," she gasped, mascara breaking into rivers. "I wasn't going to kill him!" The door swallowed her, and the cuffs, and the noise of a life collapsing. For 2 beats, all anyone heard was the alarm and the wet rasp of a man drowning on dry land. "Administer," the toxicologist said. The nurse depressed the plunger. Blue slid down the tube and into Victor's body. The beeping spiked higher, uglier, as if the poison fought back. Naomi's nails dug into her palms until pain cleared the fog in her head. She stood so still she could feel her heartbeat in her teeth. Marcus's hand found her shoulder and stayed. His grip was firm, not to restrain her, but to anchor her in the violence of the moment. "Breathe," he whispered, voice shredded. "You're here. Stay with him." A line on the monitor flatlined for a heartbeat. The room jerked. "Stay on bagging," a nurse snapped, already moving to swap out a failing piece of tubing. The toxicologist kept his eyes on the numbers and his hands on the plan. "Second dose ready," he said. "Do not wait." Park took the second syringe himself. His jaw was set, the doubt burned out of him. "On it," he said, and his voice didn't tremble. The antidote flowed again, blue swallowed by a body that had been starving for rescue. Time became elastic. 30 seconds stretched until it felt like a minute, and a minute felt like a year. Naomi heard the hiss of oxygen, the squeak of cartwheels, the soft, precise language of nurses saving a life. She thought of her mother's textbooks and her shaky pictures in a supply closet and the silver arc of a lid rolling across tile. She thought of every laugh in that conference room and how they tasted like rust. "Come on," Park murmured, eyes glued to the pulse trace. "Come on, come on, come on." The first change was microscopic, so small Naomi thought she imagined it. The oxygen number stopped falling. It held, then climbed by 1. Another heartbeat, another single digit. The cardiac rhythm shook itself, then gathered into something less chaotic. A nurse's shoulders sagged an inch, then squared again. "Again if needed," the toxicologist said, but he didn't reach for a third dose. He watched the room breathe with the man on the bed. Rhodes had gone silent. He stood at the foot of the mattress like a man watching the end of his own mythology. His eyes were fixed on the monitor, not on Naomi, not on Park, not on the door where the FBI had vanished with his certainty. He shaped a word that never reached sound. The room tilted toward hope with painful caution. Oxygen rose in small, stubborn steps. The jagged mountain range on the screen softened into hills. The raw clawing in Victor's chest eased. The bag slowed. A nurse wiped sweat from her forehead with a sleeve and whispered without meaning to, "Thank God." Marcus leaned closer to Naomi, his voice rough and reverent. "You did this?" She didn't answer. Didn't. If she spoke, she might break. Instead, she watched the numbers like stars returning after a storm. The antidote's work deepened, binding what had been tearing through Victor's body. The toxicologist began issuing quieter orders, monitor intervals, labs to repeat, a schedule for the next doses. The chaos unwound to a tight, careful urgency. Someone shut off the red strobe. Color drained from the walls. A nurse adjusted the lamp, the black jar now bagged and labeled on a counter, its performance finally over. Naomi felt her legs threaten to give. Marcus slid a step closer, the cart nudging her hip, and she let a fraction of her weight rest against him. Park looked up long enough to meet her eyes. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. The acknowledgement was cleaner than any apology. Victor's eyelids fluttered like a moth testing glass. The room went quiet in the way rooms go quiet when everyone senses a hinge turning and is afraid to breathe on it. Naomi's heart beat so hard she could feel it in her jaw. "Sir," a nurse said softly, bending closer. "Mr. Langston, can you hear me?" His throat worked. A dry sound scraped past his lips. For a second he was only breath and effort. Then a hoarse syllable gathered itself and crossed the room. Naomi. It wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. Every head turned. Naomi stepped forward before she knew her body had moved, tears stinging and sudden. His gaze, cloudy but aimed, found her like he had been hunting for a fixed point in a spinning world. He swallowed, tried again, and the second word was clearer. Carter. No one spoke. Not Rhodes. Not Park. Not the nurse who'd learned her trade to keep hands steady in storms. The name hung between the girl who had refused to be erased and the man whose life had been painted over with poison and almost stayed that way. Naomi reached the rail and stopped, fingers hovering above cool metal. I'm here, she said, voice shaking but sure. You're safe. His eyelids slid closed, not in surrender, but in rest. The monitors held their new rhythm. The antidote kept doing the work that names and money and pride had failed to do. Marcus bowed his head and let one tear fall where no one could see it. You did this, he said again, barely sound now, as if the room needed the truth repeated to set it in the plaster. Behind them, the jar sat in an evidence bag with a chain of custody tag, just another object flattened by paperwork. In front of them, a life rose one measured breath at a time. Naomi stood between the two, shaking, steadied by a hand that had mopped floors for decades and by the science she refused to abandon in the dark. The suite exhaled. The fight wasn't over, but the tide had turned in plain sight. And the first name Victor Langston formed on the way back was the one everyone had tried not to hear. The suite had quieted into a strange reverence, the kind that followed storms. Victor Langston lay propped against pillows, pale but alive. The monitors steady now, their beeps no longer screaming but marking each second like small affirmations. The antidote had worked. The poisoner was gone. What lingered was the weight of truth settling across every face in the room. Victor's eyes opened again, clearer this time, and his voice rasped through the hush. She saved me. Every doctor, every nurse, every attendant froze. His gaze was locked on Naomi, not wandering, not cloudy, but sharp with intention. Naomi Carter. He said her full name as if etching it into stone. Rhodes's jaw flexed. For hours he had wielded certainty like a blade, but the billionaire's words cracked his armor. Heads turned toward him, waiting for the rebuttal that would not come. The silence pressed harder. He swallowed, his throat working. Finally, stiff and strangled, he spoke. Miss Carter, I owe you an apology. We all do. His silver hair gleamed under the harsh lights, but his authority had dulled. Naomi didn't gloat. Her hands trembled against the rail of Victor's bed, but she only nodded. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. For the first time, she was seen. Days blurred into a week, and when the hospital auditorium filled, it wasn't for a medical lecture. Reporters packed the aisles, cameras clicking. Nurses stood shoulder to shoulder with interns, administrators with janitors. On stage, a banner stretched high. Langston Foundation for Scientific Access. Victor stood at the podium, thinner, leaning on a cane, but alive and commanding. He adjusted the microphone, his voice carrying strength that outpaced his body. This foundation exists because brilliance too often goes unseen, because the mind that saved my life did not wear a white coat or hold a title. It belonged to a young woman who refused to stay silent. His eyes swept the crowd, then landed on Naomi. She is our first scholar, and the reason this foundation exists. Gasps rippled through the hall. Naomi's knees wobbled as her name was called. She looked at Marcus, who stood at the back, his work shirt freshly pressed, his pride shining like armor. He whispered, "Go on, baby. Go take what's yours." She climbed the steps, each one heavier and lighter at once. Victor handed her a folder embossed with the foundation's seal. Inside lay a full scholarship, tuition, housing, stipend, everything she had once thought buried with her mother's dreams. "This is not charity," Victor said into the microphone. "This is recognition. Naomi Carter is the future of toxicology, and the world will be safer because of her." The applause thundered. Naomi's throat closed tight. She stepped to the mic, her voice trembling but strong. "Thank you for seeing me." The words were simple, but in them carried every night she had been dismissed, every note she had scribbled in secret, every laugh that had cut her down. When the crowd rose to its feet, Marcus's tears spilled freely, but his pride did not end with her. After the ceremony, the hospital administrator approached him. "Mr. Carter," she said formally, "your loyalty and integrity, especially under recent circumstances, cannot go unnoticed. Effective immediately, you are promoted to head of environmental services. Your team deserves a leader like you." Marcus shook her hand, stunned. For decades he had scrubbed the same floors, endured the same dismissals. Now he was lifted into recognition, his dignity matched with a title. Naomi threw her arms around him, her voice breaking. "Dad, you're finally being seen too." He chuckled through tears. "Took long enough, but seeing you on that stage, that's worth more than any promotion." Reporters swarmed Victor afterward. "Why trust her?" one demanded. "She's so young." Victor's reply was calm and unshakable. "Because knowledge doesn't belong only to those with credentials. Naomi Carter proved that. She saved my life when the rest of us failed." The cameras flashed, the applause swelled, and for the first time in their lives, Naomi and Marcus were no longer ghosts in the halls. They were recognized, not just as survivors, but as proof that brilliance and dignity live everywhere, even behind a janitor's cart.